Hey there, sports fans. Welcome to WHMP Sports. We've got a special treat tonight. We're here with Julia Beckley and Jessica Murdzek. Jessica, did I pronounce your name right? Murdzek?
Murdzek.
Murdzek. Okay, probably should have clarified that before. But we're here with Julia and Jess, and we're going to talk about their role in sports. We're going to talk about adaptive running, and we're going to really get into it. So I'm going to let you guys each introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about who you are. We're going to start with Julia.
Yeah, so my name is Julia Beckley. The quick synopsis is 3 years ago, I became a chair athlete, not because of one specific injury, but due to a progression of permanent bone disease. And it was life-changing and it was incredible. And you can walk through, you're fine.
It's super cash. We welcome all the guys on WHMP.
And then, so now I've traveled a ton for races. I've been very fortunate to do that. And I got into ultra marathons, and now my life is kind of all about adaptive sport. And yeah, so.
Cool. So
and I work for Base Performance as the adaptive program manager, which is the place we are in right now. It's our brand new warehouse office area. So
cool.
Our workout
awesome.
set up.
So you're going to focus on adaptive sports all day long.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
The minute I wake up, sometimes to the second I go to bed, are
awesome.
Some busy days.
All right. So how do you fit in, Jess?
Yeah, so I met Julia a few years ago, like maybe 2019, something like that, maybe 2020, at this meeting called Achilles. So Achilles is an international organization for athletes of all abilities. So I just kind of showed up one day thinking that I was gonna like run with blind people because they're one of the groups that Achilles serves. And I met Julia and she was like, do you want to run with me? And I was like, what pace do you run? And she was like, oh, like 10s. And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. I can totally do that. And before you knew it, she was like wheeling down the hill and I was sprinting to catch up with her down the hill.
Was she lying when she said 10s?
It is 10s on average, but the downhills are fast and the uphills are slower because she has wheels.
Makes sense. The whole physics thing. All right, cool. Let's see.
We just did like a time trial after I'd done the ultra in September. Do you remember? It was like 15:46 was that lap.
Yeah.
So the park that we go to all the time is called Wash Park, and it's a 2.5-mile loop. So it was really cool. I hit sub 7-minute miles for 2.5 miles, and that was like my goal. Was 3 years ago. I saw our really fast runners, Naomi, Amelia, Dan, whoever else, Bill Showers, and I was like, I want to be able to do 8-minute miles in the next 2 years because I want to be able to keep up. So
awesome, very cool. So you were fast and now you're getting faster. Sounds like
very slow in the actual wheelchair world though, I feel like. So but I guess I'm a pro, so meh. No.
So I want to know a little about your athletic background too, Julia.
Yeah, so being active was like everything childhood. The only sport I ever quit was gymnastics, and I think I told my parents at age 6 I didn't have time for it anymore, which is probably a good thing knowing my body at this point. But my parents were like fairly active as well. My mom has done Avon Walk for breast cancer a few times, and then my dad became a big cyclist, whatever. But I got started with tennis when I was like 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 with my grand uncle out in Sag Harbor or New York City as well. And I remember being so pissed that I couldn't hit a ball. And then it became my love of my sport. My sister played a bunch of sports, so I did what she did for the most part. We won a couple state titles in high school, tennis-wise. I guess me and my partner did. And then when I was a freshman in high school, I was doing swimming and tennis. But there was a point at which when I was getting in the pool, I was breaking out with hives, and there was one like day where I'd left my suit in my car, so it was frozen for 5 a.m. practice. So you know, like warm it up, whatever, and throw it on, and like just covered with welts. And then I think a couple days later, I had passed out at the pool, and my coach had the hard conversation like, "Hey, you get to be here no matter what. So you can come cheer, you can come do everything, but we got to keep you safe. We got to make sure that we got to pause." And that's kind of a theme, is like those ebbs and flows of like when my body is not handling things well. But I think I have this like innate drive to be involved. And so I showed up to every 5 a.m. practice, sat on the sideline, hung out with the coach as well, like during our practices that season. And I think that experience shaped how I coached a young girl in wheelchair track this past like couple months. But tennis, I went to play college tennis for a D3 school, co-college in Iowa. I walked onto the swimming as well. And at that point, I was not doing too bad, but it was after my freshman year that like health had really become even more limiting. And then about 3 years ago was when I couldn't walk around my college campus anymore. I couldn't do my job as an RA, but I had found this running thing where like I had been doing it for 6 months, not even like serious of any kind, not much training, because I was borrowing a racing chair, 3-hour round trip. And I did my first 15K, which was a story in itself. And the day after, I was in such bad pain flare, I couldn't open and close my hands, but I was super happy. My chem teacher was like, "Julia, you absolutely can stay and fight to be successful in academics right now. But there's also a difference in who you are today than who you are when you're trying to like force being able to go to labs, even if you're really sick, or all the different components." So I went on medical leave again. That was 2019, into 2019. COVID happened, and so yeah, never slowed down from there.
So when you started having those issues, did you have a diagnosis at that point where you knew like kind of what your prognosis was going to be and how your career as an athlete was going to advance?
No, so I've broken over 40 bones, and like 20 of those were between stress fractures and everything. Sorry, see if I can mute that like notification. And there we go. That should be fixed. Okay. So remind me what you were just asking.
When you got your diagnosis and when you knew that your health was going to be affecting being an athlete going forward.
It's kind of crazy because I don't think I ever had a defining moment of, oh my gosh, I can't do it. Or like, there were just a lot of different experiences that led me to say, hey, you know what, maybe there's a better way, whatever. But from 8 to 18, I had broken a ton of bones, and I didn't get diagnosed with my bone disorder until 17, when I had 3 stress fractures that weren't healing. But no one really truly understood the progression of adult hypophosphatasia at that point. Like there's tons of research, but I mean, I was one of 3 people who had the mutation that I did, which I'm sure there's more now. It's like my dad and I had the same mutation, but totally different phenotype, which is going to be that presentation. And ultimately, so I think things need to look different for me was when I tried to do 5Ks again with friends after being really limited already, and like just not even getting to train for a 5K, but getting stress fractures and just not great things. And I had started that process of looking at push rim and racing in a chair. And I in high school too, like was when I had all these fractures, I'd be like, just give me a chair, I'll go out with a racket. But so yeah, very endurance oriented. I like to avoid high school life responsibilities by going and playing tennis instead.
Yeah, and I guess like with the rare disorder, I mean, you don't really have and a lot of other people to look at with your disorder who have gone into sport. So
Yeah,
it's you.
time. It took time for sure. It's crazy. 10 years ago, or maybe 11, was our first summit. It was about 75 of us total. And most of that was family members, not just patients. Fast forward to now, we're about to have another summit and it's huge. Like there's a couple thousand people in the Facebook group themselves, but there's 2 other women who actually do marathons and have the same genetic bone disorder, but they both do it on their feet and have always done it on their feet, but they get femur fractures too. So, yeah, I don't know. Jess knows probably more than anyone that like, there's no comparing me to anyone else on a course.
Right.
It just has to look different. And that's a challenge I face, is that like, I have the drive to make it look like others do it, but I'm learning and constantly challenging myself to just do it my way.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And a lot of the ultra running people always say, well, I'm running against myself. I'm not really like, for you, that's really driven home because nobody's competing the way that you are.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's really impressive what you're doing.
Thanks.
So I wanted to talk too about training and your community in Colorado, because obviously you two were able to meet up with each other at Achilles. It sounds like Colorado's got a great community for training in general, and for you guys, you're able to find facilities where you can train stuff. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, Jess, do you have anything you want to chime in first?
No, you go first and then I'll add on later. I'm here for support.
So I think from the athlete with disability side of things, there's a lot of organizations, like over 40 in the state of Colorado, but there's not necessarily a ton of overlap or like communication. And one of the side projects we're working on is creating, specific to wheelchair athletes, a database of who's in Colorado as we chase this movement of getting access again on marathon courses in places that we used to, but we don't now. And it was cool. One of my friends now, he is a pro hand cyclist and an Olympian, and I met a few months ago, and he had the grant to get his new racing chair, so it comes in a month or something. We're having beers and it's like, yeah, there's just like not really any information on what is around Colorado. Like if I didn't have chair friends already, I wouldn't. And I was like, yeah, that's literally like, I was like, it was a shot in the dark for me. And he's like, well, but there's this one race in Fort Collins that comes up. And in 2021, I had the great honor of hosting and directing the first wheelchair push rim wave in Northern Colorado at the Human Race in Fort Collins. And that was my first 5K 2 years prior. And I think that just speaks to the power of what showing up does. I'm annoying. I don't go away. I spend probably hours upon hours in Runner's Roost around Colorado, which is one of our running stores. But I've fostered all these relationships that now I get to pour into other ways too, to help adaptive athletes in all capacities. And I think COVID definitely shook the ground a little bit, and there wasn't a consistent, hey, this exists. But now after this weekend, I just did one of our orgs is called My Team Triumph. And we just had our first race of the year for our kiddos, and all of a sudden things are like coming together and like, oh my goodness, I'm not having to organize this alone anymore. But resources are there. It's just hard to figure out where. And there's only 2 chairs borrowable in the state right now from an organization, and that's Craig Hospital. And so it's really hard to get into this sport that I love. It's much easier to get into hand cycling. But I think when it comes down to it, Achilles saved my life more ways than one and more times than one. And I just fit. I just fit. No matter like what I was facing, on my day, showing up 6 o'clock to go run with the group just reset everything and gave a different perspective. And we joke around with humor. We sit through the hard stuff. We do life together in a way that you would say like a church or a small group type thing does. And, you know, those are the people that I can't wait to see every Monday if I'm going down. It's a drive for me and Jess, or getting to go cheer them on at a race or vice versa, or doing other whatever together. But difference is celebrated. Difference is awesome. And I get a little bit of a, I don't know, poking of the bear from some of the, there's some rivalry. There's some friendly rivalry. I am about to own my first, I think it's a Tacoma. I'm going to own a Tacoma next year after I beat a certain individual. So
Nice.
you use this one.
Awesome.
It was either he gets my racing chair and we'll mount it on his wall in his office, or I get his truck.
So you're going to get a truck.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Good
It's a sweet deal. I
Yeah.
can use it in the car.
Cool. So you talk about your chair. You mentioned hand cycling. Let's talk a little about the difference between the sports that you do.
Yes.
So what's the terminology and what's the difference between the two of them? And maybe I'll bring up some pictures.
I'm definitely, I would say, like a novice in a lot of the areas of like language sometimes, but your basic concept is going to be any form of racing in a chair of sorts is going to be what mimics running the closest, versus hand cycling mimics cycling because you have those gears and those pedals. That being said, it's really awesome to have hand cyclists on marathon courses, and it's a really great environment for them to get to experience it too. There's whole slews of issues that like athletes face with safety that race directors have to balance and all these components. But yeah, so what I mainly do is I have a racing chair called a push rim, and it's got 2 wheels, and it has the push rim parts are smaller than on a normal wheelchair. And so I'm wearing these special gloves and I'm punching those rims to propel myself forward.
So I did a Google image search to see if I could see what a push rim looks like. And I'm just going to share the screen so people can see here what push rim looks like. And this is one of the images that came up.
Nice.
And this is this a shirt you're wearing right now as well?
I may or may not have had to go into our inventory to whip out a base shirt because all of my clothes need to be finished drying or washed. So it is the same kit. It's a Martin kit from last year, but this is, close enough.
So this
We'll see what Matt says when he sees this, but yeah, those are the 5 athletes. That's Denny. Denny is amazing. Katya, who both live local and like love on me all the time. We did boulder stuff, and that was cool. On the far right in that picture is Armando, who we've done 6+ races for, and he flew out from California for this. On the left is Steve, who is a local wheelchair athlete and runs with our Achilles group as well. They both are using what's called a freewheel. So it's a front attachment that lifts the casters, the small wheels, up off the ground.
You can see those.
And so I use that a lot in ultras too. Like I kind of am scrappy with like how to get through whatever I want to do.
Okay, so this is your racing chair.
Yep.
And you'll switch from using this one to your other chair with the wheel.
Yeah, if it's like American Heroes is one of the ultras that I've done a couple times. And and that's Lisa, who standing giving me a hug. She's amazing. One of my biggest cheerleaders, cleaned out my car multiple times, but
I'm so glad these came up, because honestly I did just do I did the push rib adaptive running is the Google search that came up, and that came up. I was like, I know her.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So American Heroes is half paved. It's a 1 mile loop, half paved and half dirt. So that was the one that I used the freewheel for the first time. I had never touched a freewheel when I did my first one, and I did, I think, 39 or 40 miles in a 24-hour period, 8 weeks post-op from shoulder surgery. I was cleared, but yeah.
So that one's a little more like adaptive to different terrain than your race.
That has its own challenges too. There's another one, I think that's called like a grip tracks. There's some really cool equipment out there, but like I get one equipment grant every 3 years, and then I get other grants through CAF, and it's really hard to fund. Now, Adaptive Adventures is a phenomenal organization, and in Colorado that has a lot, and so does Craig. So I think part of why Push Rim I push towards too is like, well, I could always get into hand cycling, but I want to try this. So,
well, and like you said, the hand cycling's more like cycling. This is more
and
like
it is
running.
hard AF. I did my first hand cycling ride. In all fairness, I had just been hit by a car earlier that week, but oh my gosh, I would rather run 100 miles every day than ride 5 miles on a hand cycle right now. I'm sure that'll change, but
I'm gonna do a quick show too on hand cycling.
yeah.
So there are a few different types of hand cycles.
Yeah.
Here,
and
so
those all go back to also what your classification is. So, you can see people who are laying fully down versus ones that are kneelers. Kneelers, I don't know exactly what shift in classification. I think you have more ambulatory legs or you have more control to a certain extent versus someone who is laying all the way down. And there's lots of different positions for it in general and adjustments. There's mountain biking, there's road racing, all of it. So.
All right. So right now, not your main sport, the hand cycling, the push rim is your main love right now. All right. So what we're talking about training and about how you're doing running, you are a member of the Women's Hunter Miler Project. You've been following along with the training program that Lee has built out. And I know Jess has been following along with that too, working up towards Leadville. So I want to know how you've been able to take some of the things from the plan and adjust them for you, because the plan was, written to adjust to some different bodies, but your needs are a lot different than your average trail runner.
Yeah. I don't even remember how exactly. I think I found it through one of the other trail running women's groups, or maybe, I don't know what, maybe I was Googling, but it was the coolest, most amazing resource to stumble upon. So when I was doing getting ready for my first stuff, I had Chrissy Meal, I think is her last name, her book, How to Run Your First Ultra or something, that has all these plans. The cool part was it talked about the crew and all these different things. But I just keep soaking up information from Lee and Carmel, fangirl a lot over this. And it also, I'm sure, saves some of my friends some text messages about hey, is this a bad idea or not? So I'm sure they appreciate that. But Lee from the get-go was like, welcome, awesome, let's have you. Let me know what you think you want to, mess with and stuff. And I think Colfax Marathon kind of became the priority, and unfortunately, it had a broken arm. So some of the components changed a little bit for me in that way too, just like any injured athlete. But it's really helped me focus on strength training and why I'm doing the strength training and why it's important to look at how your body is moving. And one of the examples I think to tie that to is, I think it's suggested after one of your long runs to do some exercises where it's lifting your leg over the gate, I want to say is the one, to figure out where those imbalances are. And I mean, I get a lot of that if going to PT consistently too, but it's very different to start building those skills and how they can incorporate. So looking at, okay, well, where's my position in my body before and after? Where, what arm am I favoring? What piece? And then incorporating the strength and training. Strength and training is how I got through Colfax Marathon with a broken arm for the 6 weeks leading up to it, and how I recovered well. And like, I can't say enough about that. And I look at the exercises that like are posted or the different ideas, and I kind of think about what part of my running would mimic that part of their running and what muscle would, work with that. And then the training plan wise, like looking at phase 1 and phase 2 and kind of balancing, okay. And I really, really appreciated recently, a few months ago, when Lee was talking about how you increase your load. And one of the options was to increase every other week. You could increase more every other week. Then like you could do 20% versus 10%, whatever example it was. And that just was like looking at my Strava, I was like, oh yeah, that's me. I go up to like 45 to 50 a week, whatever. And then I go to 30 and then I go back up. And I think it's always a question of how can I increase my recovery time, because I'm not always good at that. And I think that's my weakest area. How can I better recover? How can I do those things without just pushing through and forcing miles that shouldn't be happening? And that was a hard lesson last year and still is. It's, and I mean, I think about 10 days after I broke my arm, I was doing a half marathon with a friend who's going to do Colfax, the full marathon with me. And we got to the start line and they said, you look like shit. Or they said, how do you feel? And I was like, fine. And they're like, well, you look like shit. Your lips are blue. Your voice sounds off and everything. And I think that is so imperative for me to have people around me who are attuned to who I am as an athlete in person and act as a service human in many ways of like, sweet, like you are at this start line and you look like crap. And, but is it to the point where you shouldn't be running, or is this going to be, we're just going to do this very differently? And it's hard. And I turned the question on him and I was like, so what would you do? And he's like, well, what I would do isn't going to land me in the ICU. So, challenge yourself in that thought process. And it was important to me at that time because it was like, I need to know that this is possible to do Colfax. I just need to know it's possible. It was 8 weeks away and I was stressed, but.
Well, it's cool to see that like you've actually been able to, take that training and make it work for you. And Jess, you're doing the training too. So
I am doing the training, yes, and hating the hill repeats as everyone else does.
Yes.
She only like hill repeats if she's running with me, because then she doesn't have to run fast.
Yeah, well, not up the hill, but down the hill. She's got a motor.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good point.
I got to skip hill repeats this week, and that's been the nicest thing about having COVID.
Oh man,
I took the test. I was like, sweet, don't have to do hills tomorrow.
I do admit that like out of all the runs I race or friends I race with, they're like, you're the strongest climber we've seen when it comes to climbing compared, and like, yeah, you're not Susan Sarconi, Tatiana McFadden, any, whatever, but like your natural climb is really good. I was like, yeah, I don't mind. I had a friend who's like, I hate hills. And I was like, well, you're gonna need to learn to like them. Like,
yeah.
Or
hills are actually fun. I mean, you dread them, but they are fun. I have a Spotify playlist for doing hills. I can share it with you guys later. It's all hill themed songs. I was hip to Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill before it was on Stranger Things, so it is on the playlist. I'll share that with you guys. Let's see. We talked about training. I want to get into like what adaptive running is, and I think we've gotten like a good baseline, and I want to know a little more about like how large is the field of runners at events we've done. We've seen those pictures where like we saw 5 people in the pictures. Is that the whole field? Is that a typical race, or tell me more.
So on the front of wheel specific and going even more specific, the wheelchair racing, whether free wheel or whatever, having 5 people at a start line that is a small local race is a big deal. Big deal. I have raced with 2 other women in this state, and that's it. One spends most of her time abroad anyways. So like when she's here, and when she's not, she's not. Another one travels a ton too. But I didn't race with another female the first 2 years I had been running. I had raced with tons of males and pusher and and I had raced with a friend who was a hand cyclist, but no other pusher. And so that was always like kind of an exciting, like want to be able to do. But Colorado doesn't have a program development for push rim historically, but there's a movement to change that by far. Like I was just coaching for a track season, and part of it starts with like races allowing us to be on course and getting my salt delivered. They would be proud. It's like a big box of salt. It's great.
Awesome.
You can tell Lee that I salted up today.
Excellent.
So wait, what was I brain fog moment?
So you're talking about getting more races
Yeah.
to have.
I really liked so I was super spoiled. I got to go do boulder stuff, and when you're a wheelchair athlete and you qualify for it, whatever, you get pro designation, which means I got to go to like the media stuff, the breakfasts, the lunches, and like meet all these like amazing people, as you saw. Like I was like, oh,
Yeah.
like and so that was so cool. And I remember, I think it was Frank Shorter who said the most important part of having the best show up on a course is you get to look and say, oh my goodness, that looks really cool. That's possible. And that's, that's great for the runners world, right? Like that exists, but there isn't a huge presence of that in Colorado. There's like a couple, at least over a dozen, plus we have the Paralympic Training Center, but they're more tri-focused down there. But they still, have push room athletes for sure, because that's part of their tri. So yeah, access is something. And up until this year, there were no marathons that were ready to have a wheelchair athlete. And now after Colfax, there's 4 or 5 that are on the table right now in the next year. And it's always a challenge, but it's also not my own fight. I happen to be the right voice, right time, right whatever, to be the athlete that did Colfax.
Right. The only athlete who's done Colfax in 11 years. So they changed the course 11 years ago, and they were like, no more wheelchairs allowed. And Julia,
they're pretty aggressive with it.
Yeah, and you were persistent enough to be like, let me on the course, let me on the course,
Yeah.
let me on the course.
And
they let you on the
really
course.
has to send a message to race directors too, because a lot of them probably don't want to be like the first one to do it. They're like, well, I don't want to be the guinea pig.
I think everyone has a different vision of what that looks like. Colfax Cree is the race director, and Andrea, the CEO. Back in the very beginning, it was a wheelchair championship course because of how great the course was for wheelchair athletes. And I now, like, as I expand more knowledge, especially after getting Boulder, I'm like, oh, well, like maybe, some of these races are like, oh, well, we have to give this VIP experience just to have a chair on the course. And it's like, this is really like about having a recreational opportunity too. Like, I wanted to do Colfax from the very beginning because they used to have a half marathon course that we're allowed on. They took that away last year. And so we're starting the process, and I'm very, very, very unfairly blessed with the amount of strength and the people that I'm surrounded by. And one of those friends is Jason Romero. And Jason had listened to me talk on and on and on about Colfax and like going on about the latest email or whatever, and strapping him off after a coffee. Jason's a blind athlete. And he said, Julia, you either need to figure this out and go get an organization to make this happen, or let it be and go somewhere else. So he emailed his best friend who owns a consulting firm. And I said, so I need your help. And within 24 hours, I had a consulting firm that was doing pro bono work with their legal team was also a blind athlete that had done Colfax in its inaugural year. And I think it was really, really hard for me to say, yes, please send this letter that like is pretty strong and says, this isn't right. You're not, this isn't ethical. This isn't okay. And I think, you know, being that persistent is what opened the door. And then also setting everything up for success. And that only came because of all the failure that I've had. Like, I think some people struggle with me that I'm ready to fail. I'm okay with failing, and it can be terrifying if I fail. It could be a hospital stay, it could be a broken bone, and all these things. And but you know, I was supposed to do New York City Marathon last year and I didn't get to do it. But I texted my guides the morning of Colfax and I was like, remember how I said that I'm at some point I'm going to be at a start line and you're going to be there or whatever, and we're going to say we get to be here today because we didn't do that then. And that goes into like my overarching brain thought of finish lines don't matter. You don't have to cross a finish line. You don't even have to cross a start line to be impacted by an event or to gain something. And so, yeah, that entire process was insane. And then the last minute, Jess can speak to how things fell apart over 5 months off and on. Like we would overcome one thing and then there was the next and the next and the next. And then it was 7 days before, I think, the race, when my main support runner, who I knew could absolutely keep pace with me, you know, if they trained, if they were like up to their general comfort training level, whatever, they're fine. But they weren't doing so well with bronchitis issues previously or whatever. And so all of a sudden I had like 5 days to figure out this new plan. And that's where the running community came in. And to have people who can, like, this happens over and over and I just can't be grateful enough. But I had 3 extras step in and say, okay, here, we're going to relay style. This is what we're going to do. And phenomenally crewed me for only having known me 2 weeks. And they had seen me have like a medical emergency, like a week into knowing me or something. And I was like, it's okay if this is too much. And they're like, no, we just would prefer that we know where your meds are in your car versus us like going through the car to find the meds. That's all. Yeah. We don't really care. Well, they care, but, and like the kindness and love from that is like, I don't know that I deserve the amount of, love that went into that, but it's definitely been a like catalyst for doing this well, learning that, okay, so whatever. Most marathoners don't need any kind of support person, whatever. Like they have their outside sport, whatever. Who cares? Whatever. This is my race. This is my journey. And if it's going to make it safer and it's going to make it better and then let's go for it. And plus I absolutely love running with people. And I love sharing that. Like, that's why I was like, Jess, come on, can we do this? Like, can we go on the podcast and stuff? Like, I love my guides. I love my support runners and getting to do the journey with them. So
that's awesome.
Better than Shalane Flanagan.
I think like some of the things you talked about, just like that goes along so well with the ethos of the Women's 100 Miler project. And part of that is just getting women to take that risk, because you look at like this low number of women that are at these finish lines for these hundreds, but the percentage of 100-mile finishers, female 100-mile finishers, is actually better than the percentage of female 100-mile starters, because women are less likely to be willing to take the risk of failure. And if you want to get to that finish line at all, you've got to be able to take that risk. So I love that you mentioned that like you got to go out there and be willing to fail. Of course, all the training is all contributing to maybe making that less likely, but being willing is such a huge part of it. So, and
I think Lee and Carmel have done this phenomenal job of creating this community where you don't always have to experience a really shitty thing to know how to handle it. Or if you do experience it, then you have someone who's like, oh yeah, this is how we handle this part or whatever.
Yeah.
There's like so many things I've learned from the group that like I take Like one of the things is Tums, which I knew from working in the plasma donation center. We give Tums to people who they get cramping or tingling in their fingers, which can be a sign they may have a seizure or something, because calcium, potassium channel blockers. And so that extra calcium, and one of my like friends, when we were like swimming, I like brought out Tums for someone who's like struggling heat wise and lots of things. And I was like, yeah, it helps. I think ionize is the correct term. The like other electrolytes, it helps them be taken in as well, and calcium itself. So yeah, it's like really, really cool, because so much of my like experience is texting random friends, not random, but the friends who are like patient enough to every once in a while respond and be like, yeah, this is how I handle this aspect, or this is, and I think the coolest thing for me is like, it is very apparent everything about me that is different. It hasn't always been that way, but it is. I have a trach, I have a central line, I have all these things. But I'm experiencing the same exact challenges that other ultra runners are, and vice versa. And I like, an example is like, Courtney DeWalter was doing the Colorado Trail. Now she was like, I think 300 miles in, but she ended up with lung issues because of the accumulation of lack of sleep, all the other factors that were going into her body. And that's the thing that I have to face at my baseline to protect myself, to not experience the same way. Or like Camille Herron has had a journey of, I think right now she's been fighting high iron or like different things like that. Like all these like people that are big names or whatever in the running, ultra running, but they're also so real. Yeah. Like what other sport would I be sitting next? Like I don't get to go hit with like Serena Williams at a tennis meet or whatever, like even if whatever, like, and there's just an overlap that's really cool, adaptive and whatnot. But like here we are at Jackpot where Camille Herron's like running her loops, and this is the year before she set the new record this year on that course, but this was last year, which but like when she's like, you got this, and then you pass her and you go, you got this. It's really cool. So
yeah, that sounds like really fun experiences.
But I think like people focus on those big names, but it's the names that like Jess, for me, she's gonna like try and deny any of this, but is like, I don't even know what level of Jess is amazing. Jess, if Jess is ready to go for a run with me and I'm ready, like things become possible when I get to do it with someone else and get to share that journey and story, no matter where we're all at with things. Like I love run clubs. I love doing all the things. Yeah, cool. Getting to meet the other pros and stuff, but it's way more cool to me to get to like hang out with someone who's never picked up running shoes in their life. And like, I'm going to try today. I'm going to try this new thing. Or when someone faces a challenge that I faced 100 times over, like a stress fracture, I'm like, hey, it really sucks, but here's some, like sit through that suck, recognize it's hard. And when you want to, or you have another step, like, here you go. But
another thing I wanted to talk about with adaptive is as your health progresses and as your condition change, how do you recognize when you need a different adaptation? So you talked a little about like being willing to move to the chair early on, but like how do you know when it's time to say, okay, I need to do something different?
I think I push past it and then find out that I pushed past it. Last year I messed up a lot last year, especially with Jackpot. And it impacted others, messed up. So between heat, exposure, and all these things. And so I think when I have those big failures, it is very hard to pick yourself up and redeem yourself. But this year I did that when I went and did the Vegas half and as well, which the ultra was what I did last year. But I think sometimes it's like a friend will be like, hey, this is a way we can do this. And other times it's like, oh, well, I've done it this way. I used to be like, oh, well, if I'm a wheelchair athlete, I have to be in my wheelchair the entire time. And like, yeah, for a marathon course or whatever, like I'm not getting up more than likely. If I am, whatever, who cares? I'm not competing for money. I'm not qualifying for something like that. Or accepting help, which is a new one, being pushed up a hill. That came after breaking an arm. Sorry, brain moment here. Oh, the like knowing when to change how I do things. I think American Heroes is a good example because it's this 1 mile loop and there's this very short, tiny, you spend less than 2 minutes on it in a chair. I've timed it going up it, but you do that and then like, it's like lifting your highest weight for 2 minutes and doing it every 15 minutes for 24 hours. And this year, I was like, you know what? I could potentially save my shoulders and stop, like, not get the really, really badness, because like my shoulders aren't great either. Like, and I can walk up that hill potentially, or I can, navigate it differently, go backwards, go do all different things. But I think I myself am just willing to do whatever it takes versus like it has to be perfect. I balance that though. Like I get really stressed and I'm like, well, everything has to, and then I overwhelm and nothing gets done. And we're like sitting at the side of my car 20 minutes before start, like getting things done. So I think part of it comes from other people's perspectives too. Especially offering too after Colfax. My running partners, Eddie, Josh, Veronica, Jess, were like, sweet, next time what we're gonna do is we're gonna have you come over to a friend's house a week out and we're gonna prep everything in front of you and you're not gonna lift a finger because that is a lot to have to do physically for you that we can do. And those little changes come with time. Like the first 3 half marathons I did, I dropped my lung function 50 to 70% 24 hours after running each time. So now I have a different approach to that. Now I can run marathons without dropping my lung function. But one of the latest challenges is I have severe hypoglycemia issues that it's not diabetes, but it's partially medication. It's just all these different things that happen, but like dropping my sugar below 50, below 30 or something like that. And that gets scary quick. Like if I'm sitting at 70 and we're in the middle of like doing a 50 miler, that's not good.
Right.
It means we're going to drop and we're going to stay dropped. And that's something that other people experience too. I know tons of ultra runners are like, yeah, fueling really was a struggle with blood sugar levels.
All right. And that kind of relates to, I wanted to talk about like people who want to get into adaptive sports. So whether they are new to having an impairment and we're already an athlete, or whether there's somebody who's had an impairment for a while and wasn't into sports but wants to get into it, how would they go about like finding something to do and getting into it?
It's so dependent on where your physical location is sometimes, but as much as we hate on social media is the biggest game changer for people with disabilities. And there's definitely some hard parts of it, but the resources that I've pulled digitally and virtually versus like what's been in my own backyard has shaped, like I didn't know about Achilles because of anyone in Colorado. I knew about it because I had a friend who was in Houston doing it. So organizations are helpful. You can, if you're under the age of 23, there's Move United has junior development stuff. And just finding other people. Something like Ironman, for example, if you reach out to someone from Ironman, they may or may not have a way to connect to you. They more than likely have a way to connect you to other things. Like that's kind of what I serve to do as well. Working at base sometimes is like, hey, here's the goal you want to do. Sweet, let's navigate that together. And I'm incredibly lucky to have had that and to get to be in this spot and get to give that. Matt Miller, who's just over there giving salt, and the kiddos were in here too, his kids and his wife, Lauralee. Matt's been guiding blind athletes on Ironman courses for I think over 20 years. And not just like Ironman, all these, and his experience. Like I brought a friend over to try on some stuff, so she is joining the team. And right away, Matt's super perception is like, so how much vision, I work with blind athletes, but visually impaired. What's your vision impairment like? Because you navigate really well. Like just, it's like walking around an office or something. But I think when it comes down to it is like, you have to have a little bit of fire in you, and you have to have people who can pour some gas on that fire to go. Like, and I really liked the way that my rec therapist said it recently was, it's amazing what determination is created in the face of what sports, it's amazing in the face of adversity, what can be created determination wise to overcome that because of sport. So, and I think that, like, you look at like one of the coolest movies that I love right now that not a lot of people know about is Rising Phoenix. It's a really great documentary that's about the Paralympics and a bunch of different athletes, and it's amazing. And I think, yeah, okay, I'm an athlete with a disability, so I love the Paralympics already, but not one single person has the exact same thing going on or looks the same way, but their accomplishments are incredible. Like, they're world-class athletes.
So if we're going to send a message to race directors, as far as can you make your race open to chair athletes, what's kind of the flow chart that they should look at to be like, okay, and my race is a good candidate for inclusion of chair athletes?
I think the first thing is to not reply with a hard no, and don't reply with in the future. I mean, it's okay if in the future is your goal or whatever, but to start to have a conversation, because I think there's a very big spectrum of what it could look like. A course that may not be ideal for a racing chair could be great for a freewheel kind of thing. Like, there's a spectrum of being able to be out there and using support. There are a lot of athletes that have tons of experience and letting them use those voices. Maybe you do a pilot program approach. And it doesn't happen overnight that you have 30 wheelchair athletes showing up for your race. So it's not as scary, I think, sometimes. And like, we're wanted out there. I mean, there are some people that say things that make it clear that we're in their way, but that's not even close to the majority. So that's 1 out of a million, maybe. It's like, cool, I'm so sorry that my wheelchair is in your way.
So if a race director wants to, they say that they want to include, what's some good resources for them? Should they go to like ask people at Achilles? Can they reach out to you and be like, hey, this is what my course looks like?
To me. I am 1000% up and ready to work with races. Julia at baseperformance.com is a great way to get a hold of me. I'm working with the Maui Marathon right now and some of the Colorado ones. And then there's also local athletes around the country that have tons of experience. I think I have the unique perspective because I'm more recreational focused. Like, that was my start. That is still where I'm at versus a professionals level. But just starting with like asking those questions and knowing that your course probably isn't much different from any other course that we're on already, minus the fact that like Leadville 100, some like absurd thing of like, oh, well, I could go do that. Sure, whatever, you can do anything, but also like pick something else. Like, that's not really, let's, but
so minimal water crossings.
But if you're doing like a road race, or if you're doing, and there's support. I had 6 people and it would have been like over 10 easily coming out to make it happen. So if part of your struggle is that you don't have enough support to put towards it, tap into other resources. And ultimately, like, it is your responsibility to this community and to the running and to everything to be inclusive. And sure, you could make the argument that it's an extra burden. You can make the argument that it requires more resources and XYZ things, but no part of that actually justifies not working towards inclusivity with athletes. And that's not just chairs, that's across the board. And I think the organization that I would 100% send you right away to is going to be Imperative Movement. And that's who I've worked with. It's the consulting firm. So Mark Lucas, Imperative Movement, has, I think, over 40 years of experience in this. And he's the reason that the Olympic and Paralympic Museum wasn't just the Olympic Museum. He was a big part of like making sure that name. He didn't say that to me. I found that out. But yeah, there's awesome resources. So shoot me an email. If you're someone who is an adaptive athlete and you need resources like nutrition and gear, come join our base adaptive team. You know, if you need some help with that, Adaptive Adventures is really big around the country. VAs have a lot of stuff. So like, just start, just go for it. Start, show up, find out. I'm always willing to help pass it along.
Awesome.
I would also say that for like race directors, there's only benefits that can come from you accepting more athletes. Like as an able-bodied athlete, like I found Achilles because they were running in a race that I was in. And I was like, oh, wow, that's super cool. Like I didn't even know that was a thing. And it's just, it's a huge benefit to everyone, just expanding their perspective and making people realize that like, oh, not everyone is the same, you know, and not everyone kind of is able to do running in their own way. And that's a beautiful thing. And we should kind of all be aware of it.
Cool. All right. And we've been on for a while, but I did want to talk a little about what's next. Upcoming races for both of you and what your plans are.
So I think I'll let Jess officially say what she's up to next, because while I'm doing random little things around the summer for right now, Jess's big thing coming up is like our big thing that I hope I get to crew for. I've kind of self-appointed myself that I get to be there, but
Jess, what's your big thing?
Yeah, I'm training for Leadville 100. Yeah, that's like the only race on the calendar right now because I could not handle like putting additional things on the calendar to think about.
For the record though, she's done like 4 or 5 marathons in the past like 5 months. Like she did a 50K, she did 2 full marathons, like, you know, as training runs.
I was just gonna say those are training runs, Jess.
That is true. They are now.
But there's a whole big stress of like race day involvement too. So
yeah, and it's got to be good to know that you can be there because, you know, having another friend who understands endurance sports, just even if you don't physically end up doing anything for her, like if she's got her stuff all nice and organized, it's just seeing someone at an aid station makes a huge difference, I think. I like to think that because sometimes I show up at Leanne Carmel's aid stations and I'm completely useless. But I like to see that, you know, they seem to just smile when they see a friend. Like all I have to offer is a hug. There you go. Grab your own Oreos.
Big time.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to seeing how you do at Leadville. And
then so you're sorry, I didn't say for me, whatever is next. I have on my radar potentially either a 50 or 100 in November, but pistol is my big goal, and I was supposed to do it this year, and it was my first 100. And because of COVID, I got to do it virtually, which was the coolest thing, to be able to do a 100-mile race in my own backyard that I could make accessible versus having to travel. And so that, and then there's 3 or 4 marathons, and of course Taco Bell 50K is coming up. So.
Taco Bell 50K, good. I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot to talk about the Taco Bell 50K.
That's the real MVP here.
It is
50K.
Yeah, 50K is my distance, so I don't know. I might have to travel to Colorado.
Oh, you are coming. You are coming. So I just I guess I should be politically correct about this, but the race director and I have a disagreement about whether or not I completed the 50K, Taco Bell 50K. At mile 21, many people were DNFing. For the record, this was our 5th year last year, my first. And 10 stops around Denver, 31 miles. You eat at each stop. There's rules. Like, you can go Google it. There's a really great blog.
And stops are Taco Bell. You have to eat Taco Bell food at these.
Yeah,
stops.
and you have to have a Supreme item by like stop 4 and 8. There's lots of great strategies to this. It's totally doable. Everyone DNF'd technically at mile 21. I did not really, I was like, well, I probably shouldn't be running on the streets myself when it came to like some of the sketchier like sidewalk stuff, but I'll go to the park that we kind of started at and I'll just do loops. And another friend stayed with me and we Grubhubbed Taco Bell to the park. But because I went off course, it's not a finish. But you know, it's okay that there's ableism in an athlete, so it's fine. You know, it's okay if a blind athlete doesn't like wheelchair athletes. No, I'm kidding.
Scandal within the community right here.
Jason's
So what
so
we
cool.
basically need the other runners of Colorado to step up. Don't DNF, because if you're gonna DNF, then when you're on your own, you have to resort to
it's really their failure.
It's their failure. Yeah. And when were they out there doing the loops with you?
There was one who stayed with me and like she didn't do a bunch of them, but she like it was really awesome.
She did some of them.
So like Jason and Dan play taps every time someone DNFs at whatever stop. Like, it's common that people come out for just whatever. And she's like, that was the most demoralizing thing ever. It's like she made this video of like me finishing and she was like, that's right, she's the queen. No one else is. I was like, yes.
Yes. And he didn't play taps for you, so you didn't DNF.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's the rule.
That's the rule. No taps, no DNF.
I played taps for everyone when we like stopped and I continued on, but still, I think there's whatever. So I'll just take it. I am the 2021 champion. This year we're doing Denver. I mean, I don't know. Denver, and then we're hopping on a plane and doing Portland. So, but I think it overlaps with marathon, so we'll see. Jess is gonna do it though if I do.
Awesome.
I mean, that sounds insane. I'll be there for some of it at least.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that we were able to do this. And
thank you.
I thank anyone who's watched all the way through our interview with Julia Beckley, 2021 Taco Bell 50K champion. And we've gotten some really fun stuff in here, and I hope people watch it because I think it's a really fun conversation.
Thank you so much for this. It was fun.
Hey, thanks guys.
For having us.